April 10th, 1945. Buchenwald concentration camp, central Germany. Several hundred boys stand in rows of 5 in the main assembly square, facing the gate. Most of them are orphans. Some are as young as 8. All of them have already survived things most adults never will. They are waiting for the gate to open. When it does, SS guards will march them out of the camp, onto a road, toward a destination none of them have been told. Everyone standing in that square already knows what destination unknown usually means. By April 1945, the gate stays shut a moment longer, and in that moment something happens that none of them could have predicted, and that none of them could control. The guards are tense, rifles ready. Around the camp, the sound of American artillery has been audible for days, getting closer. The SS know they are running out of time to finish what they came here to do. The boys don't move. They've learned by now that moving draws attention, and attention gets people killed. To understand how close this moment really is to being the end of their story, we have to go back roughly 2 years, to when boys like these first started arriving at Buchenwald, and to the handful of prisoners who decided they weren't going to let that story end the obvious way. By early 1945, the Nazi camp system was collapsing. As Soviet troops advanced from the east, the SS evacuated Auschwitz and other camps, forcing tens of thousands of prisoners onto death marches westward. Many of the survivors of those marches ended up here, at Buchenwald. Among them, hundreds of children and teenagers, mostly Jewish boys, from Poland and Hungary. Buchenwald had never been built with a plan for children. What happened to them next wasn't decided by the SS. It was decided by other prisoners. It wasn't the first time. As early as the summer of 1943, prisoners had already carved out one barrack, Block 8, to hold younger boys, mostly Polish, Ukrainian, and Russian, later joined by Jewish, Sinti, and Roma youth. It was small and it was fragile, but it proved something, that inside Buchenwald, a barrack could be turned into a form of shelter if the right people controlled it. By late 1944, with children arriving by the hundreds, that lesson was about to be applied on a much larger scale. For years, an underground resistance had quietly operated inside the camp, mostly political prisoners, many of them communists, who had worked their way into administrative roles. The SS didn't want to bother with themselves, record keeping, transport lists, barrack assignments. It meant that some of the paperwork deciding who lived and who died in Buchenwald was, in practice, in the hands of the prisoners. One of those prisoners was Antonín Kalina, a Czech communist held in Buchenwald since 1939. When the number of children in the camp began to rise sharply, Kalina and a fellow prisoner, Gustav Schiller, made a decision: get as many of them as possible into one barrack and control who had access to it. That barrack was Block 66, set deep inside the little camp, the quarantine zone the SS avoided out of fear of disease. Kalina turned that fear into a weapon. He hung a sign on the door, warning of typhus inside. No guard wanted to find out if it was true. Behind that sign, the boys were registered as political prisoners instead of Jews, a distinction that could mean the difference between being marched to a work detail and being marked for something worse. They weren't sent out to twice-daily roll call in the open cold like the rest of the camp. They were counted inside. They weren't sent to forced labor. Kalina and Schiller found ways to get them extra rations, some smuggled from Red Cross parcels meant for other prisoners. Survivors would later remember something else, almost stranger given where they were. Lessons, basic math, history. Someone trying to convince them a world still existed worth learning for. None of it made Block 66 safe. It made it survivable, for a while. By April 1945, that while was running out. American forces were closing in from the west, and the SS response was to try to empty Buchenwald before they arrived, marching out as many prisoners as possible. Jewish prisoners first. The camp resistance fought this the only way it could, losing paperwork, stalling transport lists, quietly sending the wrong names to the assembly point. It worked for most of Block 66 for as long as it could. On April 10th, it stopped working. The SS ordered a mass evacuation, and this time, the boys of Block 66 were among the names called. Which brings us back to the square. The boys standing there aren't just any prisoners. They're the ones Kalina and Schiller spent 2 years trying to protect. And on the morning of April 10th, none of that protection is reaching them. One of the boys in that square is a 17-year-old named Eliezer Wiesel. He will later write about this exact wait, the rows of 5, the gate that hadn't opened yet. Then overhead, aircraft. Air raid sirens begin sounding across the camp. SS guards break formation and run for the shelters, leaving the assembly square unguarded for the first time all morning. It lasts only a few minutes. It's enough. Kalina moves through the confusion and orders the boys of Block 66 back to their barrack. They go, and they don't come back out. Of the roughly 28,000 prisoners, the SS did manage to march out of Buchenwald in those final days, many of whom died of exhaustion or were shot along the road. The boys of Block 66 are not among them. They spend that night not knowing if the SS will come back for them in the morning. They don't have to wait long to find out. The next morning, American armored divisions of the Third Army are advancing on Buchenwald. Around 10 o'clock, SS Command orders its own men to abandon the camp. By noon, the senior officers are gone. The watchtowers stand empty. The resistance has spent months preparing hidden weapons for exactly this moment. As the SS falls apart, armed prisoners move to take the camp themselves. By roughly 2:30 in the afternoon, tanks of the U.S. 4th Armored Division roll past the camp's outer defenses without stopping. There's no one left to fight. Inside, armed prisoners round up the remaining SS guards and raise a white flag over the gate. By 4 o'clock, Buchenwald is in the hands of its own prisoners. The camp is liberated before a single American soldier has walked through the gate. About an hour later, scouts from the 4th and 6th Armored Divisions become the first American troops to actually enter. What they find? More than 21,000 survivors, and among them, more than 900 children. Soldiers who had fought since Normandy through 5 campaigns would later say nothing had prepared them for what was inside that camp. In the days after liberation, an American Army chaplain, Rabbi Herschel Schachter, made his way into the camp's most crowded barracks, where the sickest prisoners lay stacked on wooden planks, too weak to move. He later recalled calling out to them in Yiddish, "Shalom Aleichem, Yidden, ihr seid free." Peace be upon you, Jews. You are free. Some of the men, he said afterward, could barely process the words. They had stopped expecting anyone to say them. Word of the children in Block 66 reached the U.S. Army chaplains within days. Schachter and a second chaplain, Rabbi Robert Marcos, began the process of finding out who these children were and who, if anyone, they had left. On April 19, 1945, 8 days after liberation, survivors organized a memorial service on the same muster ground where the boys of Block 66 had once stood in formation. They read a pledge aloud in 6 languages, a promise that came to be known as the Oath of Buchenwald, to keep fighting until every person responsible faced justice, and to build, out of what was left, a world of peace. It was read by adults who had survived years in the camp. Some of the children of Block 66 were old enough to understand every word of it. Others were not. Organizing care for more than 900 children took time. It was nearly 2 months before the OSE, a Jewish children's relief organization based in Geneva, could arrange transport. On June 6, 1945, a train carrying more than 400 of the Buchenwald children crossed into France. The only clothing available for many of the boys had been captured Hitler Youth uniforms. Villagers who saw the train assumed it was carrying young Nazis. The words Käse Buchenwald Orphans had to be painted on the outside of the cars before the hostilities stopped. The children were taken first to a home in Equi because many came from religious households and kosher food couldn't be guaranteed for everyone. Roughly 90 of the boys were moved that summer to a separate estate outside Paris, the Château d'Amboise, where they could keep religious practice and diet intact. A group of 173 children with family already in Palestine were given immigration papers and left from Marseille that July. The rest were slowly placed in homes across France, including Taverny, where staff spent months trying to reach children who had learned at 12, 14, 16 years old to trust almost no one. Among the boys who passed through those homes were several who would later become known in their own right. Naftali First, who spent decades afterward helping push for recognition of the man who had protected them. Robert Krell, who became a child psychiatrist, and Israel Lau, who became chief rabbi of Israel, and the 17-year-old from the Assembly Square, Eliezer Wiesel, went on to write one of the most widely read accounts of the Holocaust ever published, and later received the Nobel Peace Prize. Antonín Kalina went home to Czechoslovakia and said almost nothing about what he'd done for the rest of his life. He died in 1990. It took until 2012, more than 2 decades later, after years of effort by First and other surviving boys of Block 66, for Yad Vashem to formally recognize him as one of the righteous among the nations. 2 years of quiet, deliberate protection. And in the end, it came down to a few minutes of sirens on an April morning that no one inside that square could have planned for. Without that alarm, this would very likely be a different story. What do you think mattered more in the end, the 2 years of resistance or the one lucky morning? Let us know in the comments.